Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reiki Crossroads and Connections, where we're exploring pathways and practices that support us in living lives that are rooted, spacious, connected, and practices that help us to remember ourselves. And we're doing this through conversations between a Reiki teacher and practitioners in realms of healing, of psychology, of art, spirituality, science, and magic, exploring the connections between these diverse practices and to illuminate the healing patterns that we humans have been creating throughout our existence. Thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you along for a few more steps of this journey. And today we get to circle in with an artist, with a writer. We get to talk about creativity and the intersection of creativity with spirituality and self-development. And so I am really pleased to welcome into this space Angela Smith.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love talking with artists and writers in this space. I have, background in that realm, and it's just always so amazing to me the diversity of how we employ our creativity to dive into the work that we do, no matter what the outcome of that work is intended to be, and when it intersects with healing practices, spirituality, that is all the better. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Well, we're all creative beings, aren't we? And we express that in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's something that it can be that we can forget sometimes as we kind of go into the adult world and get the pressures that space brings to us. And so, anytime we can remember that fundamental fact, I think is very valuable. So as we kind of begin to circle in here together, I'm going to just begin by sharing with our dear viewers what I already know about you, what is in the kind of public-facing space, and then we'll use that as a springboard to get to know each other a little bit better. So to begin with, I do know that you, Angela, you are a New Zealand author, you're a coach who writes books on self-esteem for both adults and for kids of different ages. Your children's books are used in classrooms worldwide and help children learn about healthy boundaries, resiliency, and valuing themselves. Thank you for doing that. As the mom of a 13-year-old, I'm super grateful to have those resources in the world. And alongside your children's books, you're also a wellness and self-love expert. During your coaching sessions, you draw on information from your award-winning series, Stepping into Love, written for adults, teaching us how to embrace self-love and to live a vision-led life. I'm really curious to learn more about what that means to you. In addition to that, you are the author of a number of books for children's, for teens, for adults, and we will, of course, put access to all of those resources in the description down below so folks can find them and use them in their own lives. So, yeah, with that, I'm excited to begin.
Thank you.
And we always love to begin here with simply asking the question, how are you? What are you bringing into the space today? It just helps us to kind of settle and kind of stir the cauldron with what is true for us right in this moment. So, Angela, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, and maybe I can also start. I can answer that with just before we hopped on this call. I opened my book randomly, which is what I often do, and there's always a message every single time that's relevant for people. And so this one, there's how do I say that? We might need to a proclamation. To help you tap into joy and happiness, I invite you to recite the following. For the more you focus on seeking joy and happiness, the more likely it is to show up. Spirit, bring me joy. Please show me what happiness is. And then I have a quote at the end of the chapter. I am ready to live in joy. Everything shall be done by grace.
Hmm, beautiful. Thank you for that bit of bibliomancy. I love it. I will see
And
you.
so I think for me, I'm feeling good. It's a beautiful winter's day where I am, and I'm connecting with you and with your audience. And when I'm connecting, that's when I'm happy. I'm the happiest. I think we sometimes when we're on the online platform, we we can feel disconnected. And so I think having these conversations, and that's what people have said this book is about. It's like having a conversation with a friend. That's what I wanted. That's what I want to put into my writing. Like, it's the compassion that can have us feeling lost. If we're not reading the right words for us, or we're not connecting with the right people, it's the disconnect. And then it's almost like it takes us a few steps backwards. Whereas I want to bring and talk about the connection. Where do we intercept, like you started with? Is it the Reiki healing? Is it just the intent that we're a tribe, that we're on this path together, that there's no wrong way of doing it? But it's just take the time to get to know yourself and to honor yourself. And the more we do that, the more we increase our self-worth. And just like hands on our heart, just here I am. Just to stop, as you said, to take a breath. It's like, okay. Because we can just be almost like outside of our bodies because we're so scattered. And it's just taking the time or the moments to just literally ask yourself, where am I? Oh, okay. Come back to my heart. This is what's true for me. Or even ask yourself, what's true for me right now in this moment? And if something doesn't feel true, and even if you don't know how to address it, you can think to yourself, or you can ask your guides, or have like a Reiki session, show me the way. Show me my next best step. But right now, I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to self-soothe. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to bring me back to me.
Yeah, there's a couple of threads in there that I want to circle back to, around this central theme of connection. I often talk about Reiki as really guiding us ultimately towards connection and to set in place conditions inside of ourselves that enable us to get there. And so I want to put a pin in the question of what you will see as those conditions. What are the conditions that are necessary to get to connection? Before we get there, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your pathway into this work. And we all come from so many different experiences, so many different threads in our life that weave together to create the tapestry of our life. And all of them contribute to where we are right in this moment. But there's often one or two that are kind of at the surface. And so I'd love to just have you share with us whatever has the most meaning for you in this moment in terms of the threads in your life that you followed to be doing this work, both as a writer and as a coach, with this emphasis on self-love and connection.
Okay, at the age of 33, I became a widow. And a couple of years later, I knew that I just needed to get away from everything I knew. I needed to learn who I was as, a solo person, not just a coupled person, so to speak. And I'd always had this yearning to go to India. So India, here I came. And I spent over a couple of years, about 13 months there, visiting different ashrams, different communities, helping teach a monk English for a month, just getting away from everything that I knew and just embracing. And it was a scary thing to do. When I landed in India, it was just like I was petrified. I remember even being at the airport with my family and friends. I was just so scared, and they said, we'll go. And I think it was just the fact of traveling on my own. And this is going back, when was that? That was back in 96. So that's a long time. So it was it wasn't really touristy, some of the places that I went to. So that was sort of it wasn't the start of my spiritual journey, but it was a big marker, if you will. And then I came back to New Zealand, and it was like, what am I going to do now? And I saw this pamphlet for was it a transpersonal psychologist? And I thought, that sounds fascinating. And so I rang up the university, and they'd already started that week. And they said they'd just had a cancellation that day. And if I wanted to fill out the forms, they actually said they'd help me fill out the forms, that I could enroll and start that week. So this is how my life, I follow the signs.
Right.
Some people would think I am really crazy, but that's what's worked for me. And so I went to university. What I found was, being an adult student, for me, the practices and the psychology and the papers, they were too much. It didn't give me enough leeway to express my soul and my spirit. So I changed to philosophy. No, that still didn't do it. And so then I studied sociology and Eastern religion, and it was like I found my place. And then finished my degree, and as I was sitting my exams, or just around about that time, I gave birth to my son, which was sort of an unexpected little detour. But when he came into the world, that was the start of me writing children's books.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, life just takes us sometimes on these paths that you never would have thought you'd go on. But for me, it's like learning to trust those paths and thinking, oh, okay, this is interesting. And now I'm very much on my path
Yeah.
of the self-love. It's like I've landed. It just took a lot of, different tweaks and things to get me there,
Yeah.
because I guess spirit or my higher self knew where I needed to go. I didn't necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you're affirming for us the not only the validity but the effectiveness of making major decisions by following intuition, by following serendipities and moments of clarity that come through signs and intuition and impulses and there's an art to doing that well and to allow true intuition and synchronicity to be the guide versus ulterior desires or things that might be going on for us that are not actually leading us but that are rooted somewhere else. And so yeah, I appreciate you modeling that for us in this story. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, knowing that you went on this journey and then landed in this place where working with the raw material of self-love and shaping that through writing, through working with people in coaching practice, working across a wide spectrum of ages, there's a couple of couple of threads that I want to pull on there, and I think we'll keep the pin over here in the question about connection. I want to get back to that, so I'm reminding myself it's right there. But I'd love to maybe take a step back and just have you first tell us, from your perspective, what self-love even means. It's one of those kind of buzz phrases. It's used in a lot of different contexts. It's used in some kind of gross marketing contexts. It's used in ways that sometimes can feel a little bit light. It's used in other ways that feel incredibly deep and incredibly powerful. And I think it's the sort of thing that probably a lot of us have our own definition of what it means. So I'd love to just have you kind of bring us into your perspective and share what self-love means to you.
For sure. Actually, as I was also going to say before you said what it means to me, is that self-love probably means different things to different people. When I talk about self-love, immediately say my hands come to my heart. And it's like self-love is like feeling at home, being at home with yourself, with your soul, with who you are, where you've got nothing to prove, no place to be. So it's like just it's a stillness. It's like having a reverence for who you are. It's someone said the other day, what do you love about yourself? And I think they were pertaining to parts of my body. And it was like, I explained that for me, it was beyond that. When you love yourself, you love all of yourself. It's not compartmentalizing yourself. I think it's moving, it's definitely moving beyond that to another layer or level of healing.
Yeah. And I love that. I've never heard self-love defined in those terms specifically. And those terms are so well aligned with the system of Reiki and other systems related to compassion and related to this idea of returning to ourself. My teacher teaches that within the system of Reiki, from its original form in Japan, healing is defined as remembering the wholeness of our true self. And it feels like that's what you're speaking to, is that coming back to, remembering and being in that relationship with the center of ourself, which is an integration of all of the parts of ourself, as you're speaking to, and letting that be wrapped in compassion for ourselves and the way that that then projects outward to others from that place.
Absolutely. It's a connection with divinity and like with the wonder of life and the possibility of life. And when we love ourselves, we will set boundaries in place. So it's not a wishy-washy thing at all. It still means we can find our voice and we can speak with love and we can speak with strength. Sorry, that we're not people pleasing,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're not making decisions that really go against the grain. Or if we do make those decisions, that we're aware of them and then we're aware of the consequences and almost the steps to not necessarily rectify, but to add healing to that space, probably like with the Reiki, with prayer, with walking in nature, whatever that, like having a reverence for life,
Yeah.
like sort of almost being a witness to our lives as we walk through it as well. And that, like you said, that's where the compassion comes in.
Yeah.
And the kindness. And when we treat ourselves with kindness and compassion, we teach others how to do the same.
And I love that you're including the fact that sometimes that process of treating ourselves with kindness and respect includes setting boundaries for ourselves and for others, and might include making choices that in the moment might be uncomfortable, or they might not be the thing we would prefer to do. You know, it might mean choosing to do something that, you know, a big part of ourselves doesn't actually want to do. But coming from that place of reverence for self and what actually will serve us and our relationships and the world at large, because that's all connected together. And that sometimes that means being uncomfortable, and sometimes that means making choices that are difficult or we rather wouldn't. There's such an honesty in that. I used to teach a class in a lot of different contexts, with organizations, with students, with various groups that centered on self-care and really working with self-care in these same terms that you're describing, self-love, you know, kind of synonymously. And we spent quite a bit of time on that idea that sometimes being in good care and good love of ourselves and others means making the choice for the thing that is less comfortable. It doesn't always mean, you know, it doesn't mean just give yourself everything you want all of the time, you know? And I think that's one of those places where a concept like self-care and self-love can get twisted and corrupted when it's put into a commercial context, or it's put into, you know, a context where there isn't the ability to kind of filter it and interrogate it and reflect on it through the lens of, you know, what is really at the core of what would be best for me versus what I desire or what I want in this particular moment. So yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that piece.
Thank you. That's the self-accountability piece.
Exactly. Is that something that you find yourself working with people on explicitly in your coaching?
Well, absolutely. And often we can be the hardest on ourselves. So it's actually bringing that back as well to almost asking, you know, what's true here?
Mhm.
What, how is this really landing for you? And also in my books, I talk about mindset a lot, so that really we're focusing on how we want to be in the world. Rather, you know, there's so much noise out there that we can get distracted. So I speak to people about coming back to the heart of who you are and how you want to show up in the world. When we do a lot of healing on ourselves, and that can be a day-to-day momentary thing, then more of us is showing up, whether it's in how we post in social media, whether it's how we interact with somebody in the community, or whether it's how we interact with our clients. When we're more self-aware and self-assured, we're feel confident to act in ways of integrity
Yeah.
rather than lack of integrity, which brings a mess, which we've all created messes in our lives, me included. And
Yeah.
that's why I had to learn to love myself. You know, I often say to people, we're the common denominator in our lives. And because you're the common denominator in your life, it's up to you to seek the changes that you want for your life. Not to beat yourself up for where you are, but just to look and think, oh my goodness, I've been here and I've been here year after year after year. do I want to change this? Do I really want to change this? And then you can set about that. And often, I'm also an intuitive healing massage therapist. And so I know like the body work, it's sort of mind, body, spirit, somatic. It's like when people talk through a session, often that's releasing at the same time. And that's why I think, again, it's coming back to community, that we can help one another. I don't think we're meant to do a life on our own.
Yeah.
I mean, I love solitude. I love my own company as well, but I also, I want to say, if I don't have external interactions with people, my soul doesn't like that. I know I'm a people person as well, that I'm meant to be interacting with people. That's what elevates my soul.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and knowing ourselves well sounds like is part of this, right? Like coming into a process of really, seeing who we are as well as we can outside of the reflections and projections of other people, and then taking that back out into our relationships. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like one of my children's books, what's it called? I Am Me, Unique and Free. There's one of the pages that says, I am beautiful like a flower. And then there's a question, in what ways are you beautiful? So it's not challenging if they're beautiful or not. It's there for the children or the adults to actually express how they are beautiful and how they see, where's the beauty showing up
I love.
in them, which is lovely, and it's other messages of uniqueness. And then my I Love Myself book. This was my very first book that I published back in 2007. And one of our organizations here in New Zealand, they bought 50 copies for their teenage mums at risk because they thought it would help them learn how to parent. And the messages in this are so much of what we've been talking about, but it's like adults reading these books to children can also take on the messages themselves. So that's where the interception, that's where the intercept comes in. So I love myself. I choose friends that love me back. So then classrooms have used these for children to draw their own pictures into as discussion points. I love myself. I feel happy to ask others for a helping hand. Because how often do we not ask for help when we're crying inside, wanting to ask for help, and we often give that help to others? Well, I always say to people, it's the yin to the yang. It's a gift to allow others to be able to give to us. So the receiving is part of self-love. And there's several messages, but here's one. I love myself. When you say I'm different, I'm still okay with me. On the other page, the kids are saying, you're not my friend, you're not my friend. And she's saying in the middle, I love myself. So it's, teaching, I say all of us to be strong in who we are, no matter what.
Yeah, and to have a different narrative from what is coming at you, like that when people say this about me, that's out here. Inside, this is the garden I'm cultivating. And I'm really curious. I mean, again, I have a 13-year-old, and social emotional learning is something that is relatively new, I think, showing up in more kind of broad terms. I think there's a long way to go for that to show up, especially in older grades. When she went into sixth grade, her teacher, in our kind of opening parent meeting when they started the school year, she said, social emotional learning is the most important thing we will do in this classroom. Yeah, we'll follow the curriculum. I'll teach them all the things I'm supposed to teach them. But the most important thing that we're going to do here is to help them to get to know themselves, help them to be in good relationship with themselves and each other, and so on. And when I tell you that I sat in that classroom and just cried, because that was not the case when I was a kid. Like, we didn't hear those kinds of words at all coming from our teachers, and I really could have used them. And so, to think about, classrooms where resources like that are utilized as part of the normal day to day, throughout the grades, makes me really happy. And I'm curious what you've noticed or what feedback you've received about the impact of including that kind of work in classroom settings.
I think I've actually got letters from adults as well from when I first published the I Love Myself book. Like one woman, she sent copies to her sister-in-law in America who was going through a breakup, and for friends of hers. And because she said she needed it going through that. She needed those words for herself. But coming back to classrooms, I had so many principals as heads of our schools thanking me, because I guess when I put that book out, there wasn't a lot of this. I wrote it out of a need. I could see something that was going on in my son's life when he started school, and a friend had said to me, I said to her, what should I do? And she said, write a book. And so that's what I did. And I think, I've gone with some of my books into schools, and I've helped the children write their own books. And it's amazing. What I love the most is that the boys would do as many hearts, if not more, than the girls.
Yeah.
And I let the children do free flow with this book, and there's 2 other books in the series. Most of the illustrations are done by children, and that's what I love. And I didn't give them any direction because I knew that they were more than capable of drawing that out of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I'd love to circle back to this pin here that I had around this idea of connection, and you know, part of the thesis of this interview series is around connections between different modalities, and also the way in which connection as a theme does tend to show up inside of practices that have any kind of emphasis on healing and on spirituality. Within the system of Reiki, there's a map of the energy system that is followed, and that kind of gives meaning and structure for the system, and it kind of just helps us to describe and then to work with through practices the way the conditions that we need to cultivate inside of ourselves in order to ultimately get to connection and then interconnection between ourselves, between all of life. It's built on a foundation of Buddhism, and so the themes of interconnection and oneness of life are throughout the system. And so, for me, I have this map in my mind and this series of practices on how to cultivate the conditions that make it possible to feel more connected to ourselves, to each other, to the world at large, and just kind of a sensitivity of how, on the one hand, that seems very simple, very straightforward, and on the other hand, how challenging it can be to actually live our lives from that perspective, and how important it is to do the work to set those conditions. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, from the work that you do in all of these realms, what for you are the conditions that are necessary inside of ourselves and between each other in order to really live connected lives with ourselves and each other?
First thing that comes to my mind is kind words. Kindness it can never be under or overestimated.
Yeah.
We might probably mix that up. It can never be, there can never not be enough kindness.
Yeah.
When we're kind to ourselves, we feel different. As I say, it's like an energy that we're giving off, because life is energy. And it's those moments of stillness. Like, at the moment, I can look outside the window in the blue sky and it's just quiet. When I head outside, often we've got some tame wild doves that will come and eat off our hands. And it's like, wow, we've got beautiful old-fashioned roses in the garden. And it's taking time to just bury my head in them. They're just absolutely divine. So it's like taking ourselves away from the strife and the struggles. If you think of like your emotions, like your house, like you can walk into a room of grief, and I never want to underestimate grief. I've been through a lot of grief in my life. However, how about thinking about opening the door into joy? Even just the possibility of stepping into a different space.
Yeah.
And then you can step into the kitchen. Like I love to bake. And I love to share my food. And so it's like that's pure creativity for me. I know when I'm really balanced, I've got energy to bake. How about stepping out into the garden? So we can get to choose which room we go into, and that's with our thoughts and everything. Am I stepping into the possibility of life, or am I shutting myself down? That's the self-accountability. When I turn up in a conversation, am I rehashing stuff of old, or am I actually coming with a few questions that I don't even know about that person? Like you've asked me, I want to know this. I'm really interested to find out this. And so it opens up. So are we opening up conversations, or are we closing them down? And when we are open, and as I say, we leave the room of grief or the negativity or the rehashing, something that we've talked over 50 times, then it just opens up a different dynamic. And if we are rehashing something for the 50th time, then we probably need to be speaking to somebody else or finding a professional so that we can move on from that.
Yeah, yeah. And circling back to kindness, right? To be kind to that part of ourself that's ruminating on that thing. This example of that relationship between grief and joy and love is so poignant, and one that's been coming up uh, in my world a fair amount. I've been to several funerals lately and had, been working with some loss and some grief, and inside of my community have had some really powerful conversations about that. And it always seems to kind of circle back around to this sisterhood between grief and love, that we don't grieve something or someone we haven't loved. And so if we find ourselves, as you say, kind of stuck in the room where there's only grief present, the discomfort of that can be so great that we shut down and don't take the opportunity to step into the room where, oh, underneath that grief, there's the love, there's the joy. That is necessarily there. It must be there, or else we wouldn't be grieving. And a dear friend of mine, when talking like in real time in the midst of great grief that she was in the middle of in that moment, and using practices and using what she knows to navigate the rooms inside of herself, she had this moment where it was like she passed through the grief and got to that center of joy, to that center of love that was inside of the grief. And what she said was so powerful. She says, "Oh, there's my loved one, the person who had passed. There she is. Like I couldn't feel her when I was only in the grief, and I was only in the pain of it, and I was only in the regret of not having come to visit her, sooner. And I could only feel the disconnection between me and her. But once I stepped into that other room, there it is. There she is. She's still there." And that was so powerful. And it was such an important reminder of the necessity of building practices and having mentorship and guides and resources like your books that help us to navigate those worlds, because, the alternatives are swept away in the pain or numb it out so that we don't feel it, but then we're never going to get to that associated love and joy. And then we're not remembering our wholeness. We're not in that place of self-love. So yeah, I really appreciate that example.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So you've talked a little bit about your work with kids and the impetus for that and the impact of that work. I know you also have projects with adults, so your coaching and also your latest project, your latest writing project. And I'd love to have you speak a little bit about that and the relationship between those two things.
Well, I'm doing the gratitude journal is coming out probably in time for Thanksgiving. My illustrator is working on the cover for that. I think just to remember the reverence again for life. Thank you. Thank you. Even thank you for the times that were the shittiest times in our life. It's for you. Those moments bring us to where we are right now, and some things we can't undo.
Yeah.
We can send love to them, but the only moment is now, is the present moment. And so that's where that gratitude journal will come in as a reverence practice of thank you. And then, of course, there's the Stepping into Love book, and there's the Your Stepping into Love workbook, and that's the cover there. I don't know if you can see that. And this one is really suitable for teens as well. Like this chapter, Finding Your Calm. There's declarations to fill out. There's your inner heart visualization. And like I always put quotes in the middle of each chapter. So a new chapter of your life awaits you. This is your time to seize the moment and start afresh. And then, yeah, the visualization is to help fill up your cup. So it's all, if there's a chapter, I love chapter titles.
Yeah.
That they just come in sideways, as often does the words that I write. And on the chapter here's there's the best thing, be led by your curiosity. And there's one, let's go to Italy. And that's all about visualization, what you actually want. It's almost like putting yourself in Italy, and you can, the food, the smells, the music, the art, the clothes. So it's tapping into the wonder and the possibility of life. And that's what I wanted to bring for teens and for adults, especially those that are in strife and think that they've got nothing to give, that they don't have a vision or they don't have a purpose. We wouldn't be here. And we don't even have to put, like, purpose can seem like such a heavy word. I think showing up as love is a purpose. Showing up as your best self. You know, we're all a part of the jigsaw puzzle of life. Nobody's greater or better than anybody else. You know, it's like the people that serve us, we would be lost without them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like appreciating everyone and appreciating ourselves for what we bring to the table, because we will bring so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that emphasis on the interlocking nature of us, of people, and that, you know, we're really not intended to be so individualistic and so isolated. You know, we really are meant to complete each other in the sense of the way in which we each have gifts and we each have challenges, and there's other people who are strong in the places that we are challenged, and that's good and right. It's not a place to feel shame. It's a place to seek a bigger circle so that things can be interlocking in that way. And that's something I've had to really learn over a long period of time. I mean, it's definitely a strong theme and messaging in the Western world and America that we're meant to be individuals. We're meant to be, uh, you know, we're meant to do everything ourselves, right? We're meant to be as good as we can at everything, and that we don't, you know, yes, we need each other, but, you know, really, if we're not strong in all ways, there's something wrong. And that's just not natural. That's just not reality. And so these points of reminders that we are meant to fit together and that we are meant to help each other, and human society is meant to be collaborative and interactive and interconnected. And that's when we really thrive. And there's so much dis-ease of the heart and the mind, and therefore the body, around the isolation and the disconnection. And so, you know, again, kind of circling back to that theme of connection and the way that healing on all of these levels really must center connection to some degree and in some way.
Absolutely. I think we hold up a mirror to the other person as well when we're conversing, when we, you know, yeah, it's like shining a light on their gifts and they shine a light on ours. And when you were talking, I had a memory of when I was in India and the woman washing the clothes down by the river. And they would be talking and chatting. That was the together time. Somebody might be holding a baby, and they were like thrashing the clothes, the clothes on the rocks. And but that was communion for them. That it gave them a purpose. That was what they. So that gave them like a plan for their day. It was like we're gathering together here. We're helping one another here. And there's the smiles on their faces. It
Yeah.
was, you know, it was beautiful. It was, you know, it was thriving. It was buzzing.
Yeah.
And as I say, I mean, I love walking along the beach. Often that's where I get my ideas, but really I want to be in the mix. I've spent too many years on my own and alone. And now it's like, no, I've learned for me that doesn't work. I want to intercept with people. I want to reach out. I want them to reach out to me. And we elevate one another that way.
Yeah.
I can't be who I am without an audience, just like you can't. And none of us can be who we are without, as I say, we need to reflect back to one another, care for one another, offer kindness, show up when others are really struggling, and again ask for help when we're really struggling. And also the times we're just coming together for joy and to have a laugh, to have fun. When things get too heavy, that's why I love entertainment, like putting a comedy on or something like that. Just absolutely laugh. Laughter is one of the absolute best medicines, because we can take life so seriously. And I can put my hand up that I've done that over. I used to, before I wrote the Stepping into Love book, I had an underlying theme of melancholy running through my life, even though I was really positive as well. And I don't have that anymore. And so for me, writing that book was an absolute gift. A healer, an intuitive healer, said to me, you're going to write a book, and it's not going to be a children's book, but it's going to be a companion to one. And the next day when I was walking the beach, the title to the book came along and the introduction, and I was away. So that was sort of, for me, if that person ever hadn't gone for that healing, I probably wouldn't have this book, and I wouldn't be speaking to you. And so that's where I love, again, that intersection. Most of my books have come about by somebody saying, have you thought of writing this, or why don't you write this? And then the downloads come through. But with the Stepping into Love book, like, I had finished it, but then when I was going back over chapters, it was like life had me go through those experiences that I'd written about, or that I was writing for the audience. And it was like I had to go through it again and again, so I could just put more compassion into the book. And those that have read it have said they can feel that compassion. So I say there's an energy running through these books. Like, for me, I'm not about goal setting. That's where the vision led comes through. That's where the prompts or whatever, I think, okay, well, I hadn't thought of going there, but if that's coming up for me, let's take a look. So it's being open to being surprised by life, and by me getting out of my own way, so maybe I can bring something greater than I thought was possible through.
Yeah. Yeah, so some of us are very much motivated or inspired, or able to take action on something that's in our heart through invitation from other people. That's the mechanism that, like, gets it moving. And I'm hearing that in what you're sharing, and it's just reminding me, and I will remind all of you, dear listeners, of the importance of naming those things that we see in other people. When we see something that we think somebody would be brilliant at, and we'd like to see them enact, cast that invitation, because maybe that's the thing that's actually gonna really germinate that seed in their heart and allow them to take action on it, is the strength of an invitation. And the other thing that you said a little while back that I wanted to just appreciate was naming that the word purpose can feel daunting sometimes, and I would love for it not to, right? Because there is a bit of a weightiness sometimes to the way that purpose is utilized. And, there's times in our life when we might feel purposeless, or we might feel like we don't know what our purpose is, and then that's a problem. But, just really settling into, the idea of purpose as what are we paying attention to, and what is our contribution at any level in life, and where are the places in our life where we feel settled and we feel right. Lots of different ways of assessing purpose and whether or not we are aligned with our purpose, if we're in it. And for me personally, I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that each of us has some, like, prescribed perfect purpose that we're meant to enact. It's more like we're meant to engage with the world. We're meant to be connected. We're meant to engage that creator's spirit that we began the conversation with, that each of us is inherently creative, and that creativity is going to get expressed in unique ways for each of us. And that, if we're working on being in connection with that part of ourself and following where it leads, then we're aligning with purpose. It isn't necessarily something that's prescribed, but it's maybe more of a feeling. So yeah, I appreciated you naming that.
Thank you. And what if our purpose is just to show up and be the best version of ourselves,
Exactly.
however that looks?
Exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, amazing.
I wanted to ask you a question
Please.
that just popped up. So what visions do you have, or do you have anything that you feel is unfulfilled or that you would like to investigate that you haven't already
In this conversation or in life?
in
Or
life? In life.
what do wow, that's a big question. What do I feel is as yet in uninvestigated? Wow, my mind goes in a variety of directions with that question. I mean, that could be, personal life thread, it could be professional life, it could be whatever. It could be what's happening in the garden thread. So let me see, what is the one that is wanting to share at this moment? Um, let's see, I think a couple of things come forward. Something, things on the real close, like just right in my immediate view, and then on the larger view. Right in my immediate view, I'm an avid gardener, and I've really been this year expanding where I garden and how I garden, and really leaning into wanting to increase the amount of productivity that my garden has, and being in more of a relationship with the garden where I'm noticing I'm more responsive to what is happening in real time. And so I'm very curious about that. And I have, a vision in that realm of being really in that relationship such that I've, got plants ready to go anytime something gets harvested. And there's a responsiveness there, so that I'm blessed to live in a climate that I can garden year round. And so that garden is alive and, in whatever stage it needs to be, whether it's resting or productive, all of the time. So that is one vision that I'm holding. And then the other place my mind jumped was, in my work, and in, both of these realms are definitely part of what I consider my purpose. Growing food and sharing that in my community is a big part of that. And then, sharing these systems of practice, and something that's come up a few times is the idea of a practice like Reiki. So Reiki would be what I would have to share, normalizing in leadership spaces all over the world. This is a kind of an idea that's been present and that other people have articulated around what they work on. This idea that, those of us who are in these kinds of practices, like the ones you've been describing, like the system of Reiki, like many others, that we know the impact that they have on our mindset, on how we feel, on the amount of health that we experience, on these concepts like connection, like compassion, therefore how we behave. We know what we do in the world, and whether or not that impact on the world positively impacts others or negatively. And it's unquestioned to those of us who work with these things, and yet broadly, kind of in there's this false distinction between like our private spaces where we might have a practice like that, and then like the real world, the public spaces. I want to see that line softening. I want to see it acknowledged and normalized inside of leadership spaces, in government, in business, in organizations, that these practices are part and parcel of how business gets operated. And we see more of that happening. There's more consciousness of that. I get to work with organizations, sometimes even governmental agencies, leadership spaces that do want to bring these sorts of perspectives in. I want to see that go beyond, like, we had a staff retreat and did some weird things at that staff retreat. I want to see it normalized in their culture. And that's a big task. It's a big vision, right? It's the kind of vision that I probably won't see necessarily come to pass in my lifetime. But it's one that I'm in the inquiry of what's my piece of it. How can I continue to do the work that I'm doing in a way that um, connects with people in those sorts of spheres and talks about it and communicates it to them in ways that they can receive and that it makes sense to them. Um, so I don't know if that answered your question, but those were the
It
two
did.
things that came up.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's because that sits like when we, that sets the tone, especially if people or businesses, organizations do that at the beginning of the day, like the beginning of our conversation, we took a few breaths and it just like this stillness, it brings you back to yourself. Then from that true self, you can expand. And I think that's what you're talking about. And just imagine how amazing would that be? You know, it's like, here I am,
Right.
you
And
know,
the way
rather.
that practices like give us the felt sensation of having more space inside to hold contradiction and to hold discomfort and to hold different points of view and so much conflict that gets stirred up and so much behaviors that are rooted in scarcity and in needing to hold on to things and contracting around them, that softens inside of us. We have less need to behave in that way when we feel ourselves to have enough space to hold contradictory ideas. And we can talk about that, but if we actually engage the practice, then we feel it. We don't even have to have the words. We don't have to define it in that way. It just simply will be true for us. And I see that again and again in working with folks, and that gives me a lot of hope in time
Nice.
challenging.
I could, what came to my mind as well is how to hold contradictory ideas. I could imagine you writing a program or a book entitled, that and sharing that.
Oh, thank you for that invitation. I'm speaking on that topic in a Reiki conference in November on just that notion.
Nice.
Yeah, maybe there's a Friday that wants to happen. Yeah. So Angela, tell us how folks can connect with you. How can they certainly get your written word, how they might be able to work with you in your coaching practice if that is what they desire. You are in New Zealand, but through the magic of technology, we can be connected across the world. So how can folks find you?
Absolutely. My website is truepotential.co.nz, as you'd say, or I'd say truepotential.co.nz. And my books are on Amazon. Angela M. Smith, author, as well on, I think, Facebook, Instagram. And I recently joined TikTok. I was guided to do that. I'd resisted forever and a day, but
It's
then
a
it
whole new
just,
world over there on the TikToks.
yeah, it just felt right. So, and I'm on LinkedIn, but definitely if you go to my website, there will be a link to Amazon if that's easier for you to purchase my books that way.
And we will, of course, put all of those links down below in the description so it's easy to find. And
Thank you.
Angela, we like to end our conversations around here with the simple question of what is bringing you joy these days in this moment, in this time of life, small, big, any scale? What's something that's bringing you joy?
Having chats like this, I'm in my element. It's like this feels like what I'm meant to do is sharing myself, sharing my work, and igniting a spark of potentiality in others.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll join you in that one. I've gotten to have so many of these conversations lately because I did a wide invitation for folks to join me here in this space, and it's been so inspiring. And I'm realizing how much I needed to have these conversations at this time of challenging things happening in the world, happening in politics here in this country at any rate. And in the middle of another year of record-breaking heat waves here in Central California, there's a lot to be contracted around. There's a lot to be concerned about. And all of that is good and right to pay attention. And we, I don't want to lose sight of what is good and right and doing well and bringing goodness and beauty into the world. And so getting to have these conversations is just this constant reminder of everything that is going right in our world and in our societies. And so thank you for being part of what is good and right about the world
Thank you. Because there's so much of that.
so much. Yeah, yeah. So, friends, I am sure that there is something in this conversation that has felt meaningful to you, that has sparked your heart, that has sparked your imagination. And I really welcome you to share what that is, what came up for you, questions, comments, your own experiences down in the chat. And if you would like to be in contact with Angela, if you'd like to include some of her books in a school that you're connected with, that would be a great gift and service to that community. All of that connecting information will be down below. And as you move into your day, as you come face to face with whatever this day brings to you, may you be deeply provisioned for that journey. Thanks so much for joining us. We love you. Goodbye.